Viewers, I'm being joined in by my colleague Karthik Malhotra from the newsroom. Now, Karthik, it's a big development coming in from the peace talk that the US has decided that they are going to release 6 billion of frozen assets of Iran. Now, my question is this a policy shift by the Washington that we are seeing right now?
I mean, I don't know whether it's a policy shift or whether these are confidence-building measures, Sabya. And it's important to realize at this point that, both parties will have to give in a little bit, to each other's demands if they want any progress as far as the negotiations and the sustainability of the ceasefire is to be continued. So remember, the $6 billion is something which was actually stuck in South Korea when South Korea in 2018 had bought oil worth about $6 billion from Iran. And that is the money that was pretty much, frozen at that time by the US and by, not surprising the then US President Donald Trump on his instructions that $6 billion were frozen. And now, if you remember back in 2023, those funds were actually transferred to Qatar, and Qatar was supposed to release those funds. But then, guess what happened in 2023? You had Hamas striking Israel, and Israel being a key ally of the US. So those $6 billion were continued to be kept frozen. But now I think as part of at least some confidence building measure that, hey, there is a possibility to go ahead and take this negotiation on the ceasefire forward, the US has taken the step to unfreeze that $6 billion. But would it really mean the real thawing of relations or not is something that we don't really know at this stage. And also, I mean, it seems like one more step where the U.S. administration has gone ahead, bent over a little bit to give in to the Iranian side, and in the hope perhaps of that Strait of Hormuz finally being open. But again, needless to say, the Strait of Hormuz was always open before the US decided to go ahead and pound Iran on the 28th of February.
Well, Karthik, if the US is indeed releasing frozen Iranian assets, then in return they have already, what we are learning from the sources, that they have already made it clear to their counterpart that they want safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, absolutely. And which is what the point was that, the Strait of Hormuz was in any case always free before the 28th of February. So I'm saying the US giving more and more concessions at a time when Iran has that strategic advantage and that geographic advantage of controlling that international waterway and that short 33-kilometer strip of water, which is so critical to about 20% of the world's total energy flows. So yeah, definitely, I think this is the US giving in a little more than what was expected at a time like this, even given the fact that the international waterway under the international water law continues to be free passage, but Iran has pretty much gone ahead and completely seized control of that waterway. So this definitely is confidence building measure, some would call it, but at the same time, I think this is also the US giving in under pressure to keep the ceasefire and the talks with Iran going.
Well, viewers, we are getting a breaking news right now where US Vice President JD Vance holds talk with Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Now, this input's coming in directly from the White House, and what we are also learning that the Pakistan is also pushing for direct talks between Iran and the US. And right now, US Vice President JD Vance is holding discussion with Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and both US and Iran are holding talks in separate rooms, and which is mediated by Pakistan officials. Now, these are the exclusive visuals, viewers, that you can see on your screen, which News9 have accessed, where the Iranian officials, the delegation from Iran is holding discussion, and Pakistan right now is the mediator. Now, Karthik, the Vice President JD Vance is right now holding important meeting with Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, and both Iran and US are holding talks, but in separate rooms. But the major point still remains that which has been raised by Iran leader, that US, if they want negotiation, they should negotiate from the point of US and not from the point of Israel.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, one cannot deny the fact, Sabia, that the US and Israel, both the sides, being strong allies, are pretty much, acting in unison, at least for the last 40 days, barring, of course, the skirmishes that we've seen in the last 2 days, ever since the ceasefire was announced by the US president, where Israel has still gone ahead and continued to bombard Lebanon, and not just Hezbollah targets, but even civilian infrastructure in Lebanon. And that becomes a red line that Iran is definitely not willing to sort of, concede any ground on, because I mean, Iran has been sort of, this big brother in the region, in the Shia region, especially for Lebanon, for all these decades. So I think Iran at this critical juncture, just to end the war on its own territory, is not in the mood, one would say, to sort of let go of the interests of Lebanon and also the interests of its own militia.